This is Kiyotaka Katsuta, a firefighter that's about to win over 80,000 yen with his wife on a game show. But behind the charming banter and happy smiles is a disturbing truth. 8 days before the taping of this episode, he was playing a more sinister game, one that ended in the murder of his 4th victim. Today's case is about a very rare type of male serial killer that didn't kill for the thrill of it or physical pleasure. His motive was all about cold, hard cash. With 8 known murders under his belt and a suspected 14 more, how does an award-winning fireman by day become one of Japan's most prolific serial killers at night? If you want to see his female equivalent, check out our video about Miyuki Ueda, a plus-size femme fatale that killed 6 men. The link is in the description. Please bear with us, we tried our best to pronounce the names correctly. Japan's most notorious serial killer, Kiyotaka Katsuta. On July 6, 1977, Kiyotaka Katsuta and his wife were contestants on a game show called Fufu de Donpisha. Similar to the Newlywed Game show, married couples had to guess what their partner would say in a series of questions. Whichever couple answered the most questions won the game. Kiyotaka was the perfect contestant, and he and his wife was the picture of a happy, loving couple. Kiyotaka was a charismatic, funny, and talkative contestant. They even won the grand prize of 180,000 yen, roughly about $5,000 today, a windfall that seemed to come just at the right time. However, beneath this charming facade lurked a very dangerous man. At around 2 a.m. on June 30th, 1977, 28-year-old mahjong parlor employee Akiko Masuda left her apartment to take her dog for a walk in Nagoya. Shortly after she made her way down the street, 28-year-old fireman Kiyotaka Katsuta was prowling around her apartment complex looking for an unlocked door. It didn't take long for him to find Akiko's door unlocked, and he snuck inside. Creeping through her bedroom, he found 40,000 yen in her dresser and stole it. As he was leaving, he ran into Akiko, who had just returned home. Startled, Akiko screamed, prompting him to pull her back into the bedroom, where he then strangled her from behind with a rope. Once she was dead, he just walked home, getting away with his 4th murder. And Kiyotaka's criminal behavior began all the way back in elementary school. A criminal is born. Kiyotaka Katsuta was born on August 29, 1948 in Kyoto and was the eldest son of a well-to-do farming family. But Kiyotaka never took interest in the family business. From an early age, his main concern was getting money. It started in elementary school when he began stealing money out of his mother's wallet and stealing his father's things to sell. But he just wasn't a thief. By middle school, he was a known problem child. He was a mediocre student, and according to a middle school classmate, Kiyotaka was a local bully and would take about 10 younger kids with him to a neighboring town to start fights. He secretly owned an air gun that his parents didn't know about and would take cabs to places unknown and come back with money. His crimes became more violent during high school. In his 2nd year of high school in 1965, Kiyotaka spotted a woman walking alone after leaving the train station. He followed her until he was close enough to sneak up behind her, then hit her from behind with a bamboo stick. He knocked the woman unconscious, then robbed her. That same year, he used a motorcycle that his father borrowed from a friend and rode it into town. It didn't take long for him to snatch a woman's purse and ride away. Kiyotaka snatched so many purses that the police began surveilling the area. One night, Kiyotaka was detained due to riding a motorcycle at night without a headlight and bending the license plate so no one can read it. The police interrogated him, and he confessed that he regularly climbed out the window of his 2-story home to steal. When the police went into his family's attic, they found 10 purses, a stack of lunch tickets, women's underwear, and other items. Due to his repeated thefts, he was expelled from school, and on December 24, 1965, he was sent to a juvenile detention center. Kiyotaka was released on July 7, 1966, and had to remain on probation until he turned 20. Kiyotaka learned mimeograph printing in the detention center and tried to find work. Unable to find work as a printer, he hopped from factory job to factory job, usually quitting within a few months. After getting into an argument with his father about not keeping a job, Kiyotaka ran away from home and got a job in a sand mine in a small Kyoto city named Joyo. It was in Joyo that he met his future wife, Sachiko. At 19, Sachiko and Kiyotaka wanted to get married, but both set of parents were completely against it. Kiyotaka's parents didn't want him to marry someone from a lower station, and Sachiko's parents didn't want her to marry someone that spent time in a juvenile detention center. But their love was stronger than their parents' protests, and the two ran away to Osaka and eloped in September 1968. Kiyotaka becoming a husband didn't change his habit of job hopping, and he was unable to keep stable employment. He began working at an ironworks, then abruptly quit a few months later. Allegedly, this was because he caused a workplace accident that resulted in the employer getting a fine. He then got a job working at a car rental company in 1969, but was fired after 8 months for stealing. The plan was simple. If a customer wanted an extended rental, he'd pocket the fee. Thanks to a friend, he was able to get a job at a transportation company in Nara Prefecture, which was close to his parents' home. By all accounts, he was good at the job. By 1971, Kiyotaka and his wife had their son and moved back to Nagoya. Things were going so well for Kiyotaka that he was thinking about starting his own transportation company. That was until 1972. In January 1972, a 19-year-old woman that lived within his route was intimately violated and murdered. Based on witness testimony, Kiyotaka was named as a suspect. However, he had an alibi that cleared him, but he felt uncomfortable and quit his job after the investigation. It was the one murder he didn't commit. With another job gone, Kiyotaka finally found his calling. His father told him of a new fire station that opened in his hometown and encouraged him to apply. He beat out dozens of applicants and became a firefighter in April 1972 at the age of 23. Kiyotaka Katsuta appeared to have it all: a loving wife, a healthy son, and a respected job. It was quite the achievement for a former juvenile delinquent, but from the beginning, Kiyotaka wasn't satisfied with a simple life. He spent money like it was burning a hole in his pocket. He bought luxury cars, kept up a membership to an exclusive golf club, regularly went to Hostess clubs, and gave generous tips, all while cheating on his wife. There was no way he was able to afford the lifestyle he wanted on a fireman's salary. With his party boy lifestyle, he had a massive debt. Eventually, he had to get his parents to pay off 2 million yen, or about $38,810 counting for inflation, of his debt, but it still wasn't enough. He was so desperate for money that he asked his wife to borrow money from his neighbors to help make ends meet. As a result, he started doing long-haul trucking part-time, but his love for cars was stronger than any sense of responsibility he might have had, and he purchased a Mitsubishi Galant FTO, which sunk him deeper into debt. With yet another debt to pay, in August 1972, he started robbing houses. Anytime he was off duty, he would drive almost an hour from Nara to Yamashina to steal anything that wasn't nailed down. Murdering for fun and profit. What started off as simple home burglaries escalated into murder. At around midnight September 13, 1972, a drunk 24-year-old Kiyotaka decided that he needed cash. Kiyotaka drove an hour away from Nara to Kyoto so that he could burglarize houses. After stealing from several apartment units, he spotted the slightly open window of 24-year-old snack hostess Hideko Nakamura just around 5 a.m. He climbed through the window, and as he searched her room for valuables, Hideko woke up and screamed, "Thief!" He attacked her and intimately violated her. Once the awful deed was done, he strangled her to death. He then stole just over 1,000 yen, or about $19 today, and fled. This was only 5 months after becoming a firefighter. Hideko was discovered later that morning by her boyfriend, who was the owner of the snack bar. He immediately called the police. Because there were no signs of forced entry, the police thought that Hideko knew her murderer. The police had their sights on 2 people, her live-in boyfriend and an infatuated customer. The investigators' working theory was that her death was the result of a love triangle. With the police focused in the wrong direction, Kiyotaka was able to get away with his first murder. By 1975, Kiyotaka was promoted to deputy lieutenant and had won the National Firefighting Technology Competition 2 years in a row. But despite the raise in pay, he still had to work as a trucker part-time to pay the bills. It was during one of these hauls to Osaka that he committed his second murder. It was after 1 a.m. on July 6, 1975, when the 26-year-old Kiyotaka was searching for an apartment to burglarize. That's when he saw 35-year-old Suzuko Fujishiro. Suzuko owned an exclusive hostess club in Kito Ward, and as she got out of her car, he snuck up behind her and tried to snatch her purse. Suzuko fought back, and when she turned around and saw his face, that sealed her fate. He strangled her to death. Once he was sure she was dead, he put her body into the backseat of her own car and drove it to an irrigation pond. He then set the car on fire and ended up stealing 100,000 yen. Once again, the police were thrown off the trail because of the victim's relationship circumstances. The police believe that Suzuko's death was the result of a love triangle between her live-in boyfriend, and the president of a company she was scheduled to meet at the club that night. While both men were under suspicion, neither were arrested. His third victim was 32-year-old Tadako Ito. On March 5, 1976, Kiyotaka was in Nagoya when he saw Tadako step out of her Chevy Camaro. She was also a hostess at an upscale hostess club. Kiyotaka went after hostesses because he knew that they carry cash after their shifts. He followed Tadako to her apartment, and just when she opened the door, Kiyotaka grabbed her. Like his last victim, when Tadako fought back, he strangled her. Kiyotaka stole 120,000 yen out of her purse. Then he dragged Tadako's body into her car and drove 40 minutes out of town, then dumped her and her car into a farrow field. He then undressed her in an attempt to make her death look like an intimate assault. By 1977, Kiyotaka had been promoted to fire chief, and once again, the increase in salary wasn't able to keep up with his lavish lifestyle. Despite his murder spree, he won a total of 20 firefighter awards. 1977 is also the year that he murdered his fourth victim, Akiko Mosada. And just like his last three victims, Akiko's romantic circumstances distracted the police. Akiko was having an affair with a man that embezzled money to keep up with their affair. He was later sent to prison for 2 years for embezzlement. Despite having no evidence, the police treated Akiko's affair partner as though he was guilty. Kiyotaka's attacks escalated when he killed 2 more people that year. It was August 12, 1977, and 8 days before his episode of Fufu Den Donpisha was set to air. And Kiyotaka couldn't care less that his face was going to be broadcasted all over Japan. He had gone to an apartment complex looking for a unit to rob when 33-year-old hairdresser Yoshiko Shikina spotted him right after she opened her door. She was immediately suspicious because he was wearing sunglasses and a golf hat at 11 p.m. She asked, "What are you doing here?" And worried she might cause a commotion, he pushed her back into her apartment, strangled her, and hid her between the bed and the wall. He stole a ring worth 450,000 yen, but left 400,000 yen in her drawer. Once again, the odd pattern of the victim's romantic circumstances kept the police from investigating fully. Yoshiko was having an affair with the general manager of the apartment complex. Because he was the first one to find her and there were no signs of forced entry, the police immediately suspected Yoshiko's affair partner. It's a crazy coincidence that all 5 of his female victims were having illicit affairs. Because those affairs clouded the police investigations, they never looked for other suspects besides the victims' lovers. A change in MO. Kiyotaka's MO changed in December 1977. Up until that point, all of his victims were women, mainly hostesses who carried cash. But what they carried wasn't enough, and he was looking for bigger fish to fry. His method of ending his victims' lives also changed. At 5 p.m. on December 13th, Kiyotaka decided to go on the hunt for people he figured had a bigger payout. He drove almost 2 hours from Nara to Kobe Prefecture looking for the perfect victim, and he found that in 25-year-old Hiromasa Inoue. Hiromasa was an employee at Hyogo Labor Bank's Kobe branch. Based on Hiromasa's clothes and the black bag in his hand, Kiyotaka assumed that the man was on his way home after collecting money. And as Hiromasa passed by, Kiyotaka pointed a shotgun that he stole months prior at the banker and said, "Keep quiet and give me your money." Hiromasa decided that he wasn't going down without a fight. Fearing that Hiromasa was drawing attention, he shot him and stole the bag that contained 4.1 million yen in cash and 5 million yen in checks. Hiromasa was found bleeding on the ground and was brought to a hospital but died 2 days later. Kiyotaka then dumped the rifle and the stolen truck that he was driving. Things must have been going great for Kiyotaka, because for 2 years he didn't rob or murder anyone. But his 2-year no-crime streak came to an end on December 29th, 1979. He staked out a gun shop and then followed the customer home. Once the customer left his house, Kiyotaka broke in and stole the hunting rifle. The next day, he welcomed his second son into the world. It wasn't until February 15th, 1980 that he used his ill-gotten gain. On that day, he stole a bank representative's bag that contained 2 checks worth over 246,000 yen. Maybe he was addicted to robbing, or he simply enjoyed killing, but on July 30th, 1980, he drove to a supermarket in Nagoya in a stolen Toyota Corolla at 11 p.m. As 35-year-old store employee Ichiro Homa was locking up the store for the night, Kiyotaka walked up to him and said, "If you keep quiet and do what you're told, I won't do anything." He then forced Ichiro back into the store and made him open the safe. After he stole over 5 million yen of cash and gift certificates, He made Ichiro drive to a garage 20 minutes away, then forced Ichiro to tie his feet together with a cord. Ichiro suddenly grabbed the shotgun and the two briefly fought for it. Fearing that he wouldn't get away, Kiyotaka shot Ichiro and left his body in the car. Even after stealing 5 million yen, Kiyotaka still wasn't satisfied, and on November 8, 1980, he stole a hostess's car and her handbag that contained 78,000 yen in cash in Osaka. But this time, he was caught almost immediately. His arrest made the local newspapers with the headline, "Fire Department Employee Steals." 3 days later, he was fired. It was the first time that he'd ever been caught for any of his crimes. And on January 29, 1981, he was found guilty of theft and served 10 months of a 1-year sentence. Whatever lesson he learned in prison was short-lived, because on August 18, 1982, he ran over a supermarket employee in an attempt to rob the store. And the only reason he didn't kill the employee was because people rushed to the scene. One-man crime spree. Determined to be a one-man crime spree, on October 27, 1982 at around 9:30 p.m., Kiyotaka stole a car and drove to a semi-deserted road where a black car was parked. He then called the police on the payphone and said that he spotted a black car that he believed was stolen near a police box. Police boxes, or kobans, are many police stations dotted throughout Japan. Usually, there are 2 to 4 officers staffed in them at any given time. After the call, Kiyotaka returned to his car and waited. 33-year-old officer Hiroaki Nagahashi responded to the call on foot soon after. He looked inside, and when he didn't see anyone there, he wrote the license plate number down and headed back to the police box. As Officer Nagahashi was walking, Kiyotaka revved up his engine and drove right into the officer. Then Kiyotaka got out of the car and went over to the injured and disoriented Officer Nagahashi. Kiyotaka asked him what was wrong, and before Nagahashi could answer, Kiyotaka hit him over the head with an iron bar, leaving him unconscious. Kiyotaka then stole the officer's gun. Nagahashi was found at 9 a.m. the next morning by a passerby. He sustained severe injuries to his head, knees, and nearly went blind, but was able to make a complete recovery. 4 days later, on October 31st, Kiyotaka tried to rob 2 different supermarkets in Hamamatsu, but the employees thwarted him each time. With 2 failed robbery attempts in 1 day under his belt, Kiyotaka decided against robbing a 3rd supermarket, and instead, he drove nearly 3 hours from Hamamatsu to Otsu. At 8:30 p.m., he parked at the Otsu service area and spotted a yellow station wagon. He approached the car and pretended to be a hitchhiker. He leaned into the window to talk to 27-year-old Mitsuharu Kamiyama and accidentally dropped his gun. Mitsuharu spotted the gun, and before he was able to start his car, Kiyotaka picked up the gun, pointed it at his head, and forced Mitsuharu to drive about 2 hours away to Nagoya. At around 9:30 p.m., Mitsuharu suddenly stopped the car and tried to grab the gun from Kiyotaka. The two fought, but in the end, Kiyotaka shot Mitsuharu in the chest, then rolled him into the back seat. As Kiyotaka continued to drive to Nagoya, Mitsuharu surprised Kiyotaka and asked for some water. Kiyotaka claimed he drove looking around for a hospital, but when Mitsuharu eventually died, he stole 40,000 yen from the body and threw him out of the car and continued to Nagoya. Mitsuharu was Kiyotaka's last documented murder, but it wasn't for a lack of trying because he shot a gas station attendant at the Euro service area the next day. The end of a crime spree. From November 28, 1982 to January 30, 1983, Kiyotaka continued to rob grocery stores as he crisscrossed between Nagoya and Kyoto. But it was his attempt to rob 31-year-old movie company president Shuei Tsukamoto that would be his ultimate downfall. On January 31, 1983, Shuei went to the bank to withdraw his employees' wages. What he didn't know was that someone was watching him. Shuei went back to his car, and just as he sat down, Kiyotaka yanked open Shuei's passenger side door and pressed a gun against his side. He told Shuei, "If you make a sound or do anything strange, I'll shoot you." Kiyotaka made Shuei give him the envelope of money and then forced him to drive. Shuei was afraid that if he left the parking lot, he'd be killed, so he drove slowly. As they made their way towards the parking lot exit, someone walked by, and that's when Shuei took his chance. He yelled, "It's a robbery!" Shuei grabbed the gun, and the two began fighting for it. When Shuei wouldn't let Kiyotaka's arm go, Kiyotaka panicked and opened the passenger door and fell out, and Shuei was right on top of him. The witness who saw everything ran to the bank and told the employees to call the police. That's when the bankers ran outside and saw Shuei struggling to subdue Kiyotaka. Kiyotaka managed to shoot twice, but thankfully no one was hit. Even with the gun, The banker still ran over to help Shuei and they jumped Kiyotaka. They were able to subdue him until the police arrived. Kiyotaka's confession. The investigation revealed that the gun Kiyotaka used was the one he stole from Officer Nagahashi, but it wasn't until his 8th day at the detention center that he confessed to everything. Kiyotaka claimed that he had nightmares about his victims and believed that he was being haunted by a vengeful spirit, so in order to clear his conscience, he decided to confess. Only the police didn't believe that he murdered anyone. The interrogators asked him repeatedly, "Are you sure you killed them?" But once the police started to investigate, they saw that his confessions matched the crimes. Kiyotaka Katsuta was charged with a total of 33 charges that included 12 counts of theft, 7 counts of robbery-murder, 3 counts of robbery resulting in injury, 2 counts of robbery, 1 count of murder, and 1 count of attempted robbery. The charges were split due to the Japanese legal system. The first set were 17 charges that included the 7 murders and the robberies, and the remaining 16 charges would be due to the remaining robberies and murder. In total, he was charged with 8 murders. By the time his trial started on October 23, 1983, Kiyotaka confessed that his first murder was at the age of 16. He also told the prosecution that he killed at least 10 more women before 1972. But because he either didn't remember the details or refused to say, the police were unable to charge him due to lack of information. It's believed that Kiyotaka's total kill count is 22 people. 2 years and 7 months later, Kiyotaka Katsuta was found guilty of all charges on December 23, 1985. On March 24, 1986, he was sentenced to death. Kiyotaka appealed the death penalty, and his lawyers argued that his sentence should be reduced because he never pre-planned any of his crimes and he voluntarily confessed. Kiyotaka appealed the death penalty 5 times, and on the 5th and final appeal, the courts ruled that the death penalty would stand. During all of that back and forth, he wrote a prison memoir titled Days Hiding in the Underworld. He also made a friend, a Christian housewife named Yuko Kodoso. The two began communicating after she read his book and started to write him letters. By the time that Kiyotaka was executed, the two exchanged over 600 letters, and she visited him over 200 times. And like so many criminals with little options and a lot of time on their hands, Kiyotaka decided to give his life to God and become a Christian. Yuko's mother adopted him, and he officially changed his name to Kiyotaka Fujiwara. Kiyotaka was informed of his execution at 9:30 a.m. on November 30th, 2000. In Japan, inmates are told of their execution the morning of and are executed around 2 hours after being informed. Families of the inmates are typically notified after the execution has taken place. After refusing to write a will, he was persuaded by monks to write 2. The first will was a message of gratitude to his parents, and the second will asked that all of his possessions be incinerated at the detention center. Once he finished writing his will, Kiyotaka smoked a cigarette and was accompanied by a monk to the execution room. Moments before the execution, he recited a Buddhist sutra and then whispered the names of the victims and said, "I'm sorry." After he was executed and cremated, Yuko took his remains, since she was now his adopted sister, and held a wake at her church. The funeral was attended by 20 church members and none of his family members. His ashes were interred in the Kuroso's family grave in Okayama Prefecture. Thank you for watching the Twin Files. Do you think Kiyotaka really repented of his evil ways? Or was this a ploy just not to get executed? Let us know in the comments.